Hi, boys and girls. Today we are going to continue looking at the story Al at Home, focusing on the guest. So, to begin, we're going to start again with our essential question. How do people respond to the powerful force of the wind? We are continuing to look at how do characters respond to the powerful force of the wind. And today, we are going to compare and contrast the stories Gilberto and the Wind with the guest and think, how does Gilberto and the Wind and the guest build my knowledge? So like I said, today we will compare and contrast the wind's actions in the two stories we read. Listen as I read a few sentences from Gilberto in the Wind. Now, as I read them, I want you to be focusing on how the character of the wind is acting. At first, Wind is gentle and just floats my balloon around in the air. But then, with a jerk, he grabs it away and carries it to the top of the tree. I noticed the word gentle in there. I also noticed that the wind is acting a little playful. When I have a pinwheel, wind comes and plays too. First I blow it myself to show him how, then I hold it out or hold it up and wind blows it for me. Again, wind is acting playful here. Sometimes wind is so strong he starts breaking the trees and knocking down fences. I remember that from the end of the story when Gilberto got a little afraid when the wind was acting very strong. Now we want to compare and contrast the wind from this story to the wind in Owl at Home from The Guest. So I'm going to read a few sentences from The Guest. A cold wind pushed Owl against the wall. Ooh, the wind is not being kind there or gentle. He's pushing Owl. But Winter did not listen. It made the window shades flap and shiver. Winter went into all of the rooms of Owl's house. Soon everything was covered in snow. I notice the winter wind here is being strong, pushy, not playful or gentle. So remember I asked you to think about how the wind was different in Gilberto and the Wind and the Guest. We're going to use this little organizer here. This is called a Venn diagram. I'm sure you're used to seeing these. We are going to use this to compare, find things that are similar, and contrast, find things that are different about the wind in both of those stories. All right, we are in our graphic organizer and we are going to put some ways that the wind was different in Gilberto and the Wind compared to the Guest. Think back to those sentences that I read. In Gilberto and the Wind, the author described the wind as gentle. The wind also showed actions that it was playful. There was also a time at the end of the story when the wind was strong. So the wind went back and forth and Gilberto played with the wind, but it also showed some moments when it was strong too. All right, I'm going to bring a box over here so we can go ahead and put some describing words about the wind from the Guest. In the Guest, the wind was not playful and gentle at times. It was always strong. And to contrast that other story, to contrast Gilberto and the Wind, I'm going to write in the words not gentle or playful. Now our middle box here is to show things that were the same to compare the two stories, the actions of the wind and the two stories. You've probably noticed this through all this text that we've read in this module about the wind. In both the stories, the wind does not listen. Gilberto keeps telling the wind things, and in The Guest, Owl keeps telling the wind things like, get out, and the wind does not listen. Something else you probably noticed in these stories, the wind cannot be controlled. This leads back to our essential question, how do people respond to the powerful force of the wind? In Gilberto and the wind acted gentle, playful, sometimes strong. In The Guest, the wind was always strong, not gentle or playful, but both of our characters, Gilberto and Owl, recognize that the wind cannot be controlled. Now that you have investigated the actions of the wind in both Gilberto and the Wind and The Guest, we are going to ask you to create your own story about the powerful force of the wind. So you have to use your imagination and you have to think creatively. You will create a story that details how Owl responds to a new problem with the wind. You need to include at least 2 ways Owl responds to the problem, as well as a resolution. So listen carefully. Imagine Owl has a new problem with the wind. Write a story describing how Owl responds. You have to select one of the problems listed below. The wind is too hot. The wind is blowing rain in the house. Or the wind is blowing Owl's papers all over the house. I am going to pull up a story map. We are going to complete a sample together using a problem from this list of problems here. We've already filled in the character, Owl, and the setting, Owl's house. So the problem I'm going to choose is this first problem here. The wind is too hot. I'm going to write that in the box where it says problem on my story map. The wind is too hot. Now, based on that problem there, I am going to write 2 possible responses that I think Owl would have to that problem. So on the other side of my story map, I have the chance to do that. So let's think. The wind is too hot. Oh, I know something Owl would probably do if he wanted that wind to get out. I think Owl yells at the wind to get out of his house. I'm going to put an exclamation point because he's angry. Now I need a second response. If he wants to get rid of that wind, that hot wind, Owl opens a window to get the wind out of his house. I wrote 2 responses to my problem. Let's look back. My problem is the wind is too hot. I have 2 responses. Owl yells at the wind to get out of his house. And Owl opens a window to get the wind out of his house. Now, I need a resolution. It has to match my problem here. I think back to the story. In the story, the winter wind, I believe, went out the front door. In my story, I'll open the window. So the resolution to match my response is it's hot wind. Flies out the open window. I have all the pieces to my story that I need. My character, my setting, my problem, two responses to the problem, and a resolution. I'm going to take this story map and my details in the story map, and I am going to use that to write my own creative narrative story about a new problem Owl faces. All right, now I'm going to take my story map and use those elements to write my story about Owl. I'm going to call my story Owl and the Hot Wind because that is the problem that I chose. Now, I want to look at my characters and my setting. Owl in Owl's house. So I'm going to turn that into a sentence. Owl was sitting in his house. Look, I used my character and I used my setting. Ooh, the wind is too hot. I want to put that into my writing. A hot wind blew into Owl's house. Look, I described what it did. I described my wind as a hot wind and then it blew into the house. Now I'm going to use my responses to the problem. Owl yelled at the wind to get out of his house. Then he opened a window for the wind to leave. I don't love how that sentence turned out. I'm gonna edit that a little. Then he opened a window. Finally, my resolution, the hot wind flies out of the open window. The hot wind flew out of the open window. I think I have everything I need. My character, Owl, where he was in his house. My problem about the hot wind. Owl yelling at the wind, and Owl opening the window. Now that my story is complete, I want to make sure you understand what we need you to do to create your own story. If you look back here, there were 3 problems listed. We just used an example with the first problem, the wind is too hot. So we would like you to choose one of the other problems listed below. Either the wind is blowing rain in the house or the wind is blowing Owl's papers all over the house. You're then going to go into a story map and there will be a blank story map attached if you would like to use that to organize your thoughts. You're going to write in your problem, 2 responses to a problem, and a resolution. When you've decided on all of that, you are going to turn it into a paragraph, a narrative story. There are 5 sentences here. We are very excited to see what you come up with.